Hey, welcome back to the Oz Shift podcast. Today we have Lisa Bilyeu on the show, and we do a deep dive into all things relationship in ways that, honestly, I didn't know we would, and it might be the best episode I've ever recorded. I'm not going to lie. She was diving in, and we talked about everything: sex, communication, intimacy, how to talk to your spouse, how not to talk to your spouse. If you're in a relationship going, I really want to find some keys to be able to take this to the next level or maintain or fix this relationship, today's episode will serve you amazingly. I'm not joking. I am excited for you to listen to this episode. So dive in, pay attention. If you need to, take notes, get a piece of paper. I don't care what you do, but you got to dial in and sit down with a window to listen. And if you want to, listen with your partner. Like, find someone with you and, hey, we're going through something, hit play, both of you listen to this without even knowing what's on there, and I promise you, you will not regret that you did. I even share a lot of my situation, my marriage. We went deep on this one, so tune in. I'm excited for you to actually hear this episode. Without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello. We're back at it. We have you already know the guest is. I already told you who it is, but I'm going to give another little simple intro because she's here and I wanted to hear it in real time. But this person is someone I've known for a few years now. I first met her husband at this retreat we did, and then she got to come and hang out, and my camera's flickering. I apologize for that. We're going to keep it in because that's how life works. But here's the thing. This person is a ball of light. Anywhere they go, they're joyous, they're amazing, they're happy. They gave me one of my favorite teas randomly. But this person, here's a cool thing. They've accomplished a lot in life, and it was through the journey of navigating the ups and downs, literally the hardships that you have to go through to build a billion-dollar company, but at the same time, an amazing marriage and decisions that other people may not agree with, but it's beautiful to watch this human being live in her own transparently clear truth with no, views of opposite people doing something different is bad. It's just, this is who I am and how she shows up. And I think that in of itself is something to honor when you watch a human being doing it. So honored to call this person a friend, and I'm excited to talk to her today. Lisa Bilyeu, welcome to the show.
Trucks, dude, thank you so much for having me. I freaking adore you and so happy to be here.
I'm so happy you're here too, because we had this scheduled before, everybody, when we were hanging out in Napa, but then the traveling, everything, and we're both getting old, so my back hurts. I get nauseous in the back of cars too. So just so you know, for the last probably, decade with my wife, I always make fun of her for getting nauseous when she's in the car reading things. And I had to break down and tell her, like, all right, well, in the back of the car now, the last month or so, I'm starting to get that. If I read my phone, I get all sick and I want to puke. So I stopped reading my phone. So I guess you know what that feels like.
We're getting a little seasoned, I think, Anthony. A little seasoned.
My knees hurt sometimes. My son plays football, and so I go out run around with him, and my knees hurt for like 3 days. Anyway, it's not about today's conversation. So we're going to dig in. Here's the thing. I always start the show with the same question. You can take it wherever you want, and then it'll open up the kind of direction of where we go. But here's the question. I'm walking around town. I sit down next to this amazingly bright human being, you. I don't know who you are just yet. For some reason, you feel compelled to start talking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
Oh, I actually don't think you should. I don't think people should really listen to anyone first. I think they need to listen to their own voice. Because here's the truth, everyone's going to give you advice and there's only going to be one you. So the question is, what are the things that you need to hear that you can then assimilate into a conclusion for yourself? And that's where it's like, I'm going to have a message. I have my perspective, my way of living, the things that I've learned, the hurdles, the pitfalls, the falling down, the getting back up. And so I can tell you my stance and my opinion and my thoughts. And then it's up to you on whether you should listen or not. But I'm never in the habit of telling people they should listen. There's going to be 1,000 million different types of messages. And sometimes it's just the right moment at the right time, the right person is going to say it to you. It could be the barista before I even walked in is actually maybe going to give you better advice than I can at the right moment. I don't want that to be a cop-out answer. And I really do mean that, Trucks, because I think that that's important to say, because so many people will look to people that have succeeded, people that have been there, and take their word for truth. Then they'll try it and fail. And then they'll make that failure about them. And so that's why it's super important to say people are only going to give you their opinion, and it's up to you on what is going to serve you and how you use it to get better as you grow and change.
I like it. It's almost like saying you need to take it with a grain of salt, but the filter should be
Yeah,
your own. Yeah.
exactly.
It's beautiful because there's other people I've talked to, and it's interesting. People I've it was in our circle we've interviewed on the show. It's a very similar answer, and I think it takes a certain
Mm.
level of success to have gone through the journey of listening to people going like, I listened to them and it didn't pan right. But the journey of that getting somewhere, you go, you know what? If I was to go back and do it again, I realized along that path, if I just stayed true to my little voice was telling me, took what they said and tried to see if it filtered in, if it didn't leave, and if it did bring it in, you'd have gotten there faster. We'll call it. So it's interesting for you to say that because I've only heard probably 4 or 5 people say it, and we know all of them together. Like
Yeah,
so,
I love that. And look, it is so important to acknowledge why is that. To your point, is that I think so many of us blindly follow experts, quote
yeah,
unquote.
hmm,
And I did that with my health journey. My health really went really bad about 7 years ago. It felt like my gut erupted. I could barely eat anything. And so for years and years, trucks, I was just following experts blindly. They
yeah,
told me to do it. And even though I was like, my body's having like a reaction by just hearing what they're suggesting, but they're experts, they must be right. So what I was
yeah,
doing is I was actually ignoring all of my internal dialogue. I was ignoring all the signs that my body was telling me, hey, that piece of advice that doctor's giving you doesn't sit well. I ignored myself because I thought that other people knew better about me than me. And so that's why it's so important for me to echo that message.
yeah,
No matter what you think, whether it's about your health, whether it's about your goals, whether it's about your dreams and about anything, you should
yeah.
listen with an open mind and then decide for yourself.
So how do you get there though? Because that's a space that I grasp, I understand, because I've gone through enough life, I think, at this point to go like, whatever is going on, I trust that little voice because he's got me this far. What about someone who hasn't built that voice though? Like there's a person who hears that and goes, sounds good, but like I don't know if I kind of really trust myself over the doctor or the dentist or like these different people. How do you get to a point in time where you go like, all right, I hear you, but hey, I got a little bit of a feeling I'm gonna trust this more than that.
Oh, that's a great question. I think you have to just touch the hot stove, even when people tell you it's hot.
Mhm.
You have to get burned. Like there's almost, think about kid. How many times would the parents say, don't touch that, that's going to hurt. Don't touch that, that's going to hurt. Don't touch that's going to hurt.
Yeah,
Until the kid actually touches it and goes, oh yeah, that hurts, right?
yeah,
That's when they then stop touching it. So the truth is that I think I had to fall to my knees and see that I shouldn't trust experts in order for me to realize, oh, you don't trust experts. And so that's important to acknowledge. And then also, secondly, we talk about intuition, but the thing that we don't talk about is that intuition is like a skill set. It's like a muscle. You have to train it. And so what we've done our entire lives is basically we've trained our intuition to the point that if someone walks in the room and starts looking around frantically and moves slowly, your intuition says, maybe you should keep an eye on this person. They're acting quote unquote suspicious. Now,
yeah,
people just like to say, oh no, that's intuition. No, it's not. It's 20 to 30 years of you identifying that when people walk into a room and look like that, it usually ends up with, that result. So intuition to me is a skill set. And what I've done is I've actually learned to use it like a skill set. So when
yeah,
I have a few years ago when I realized, oh, intuition isn't just a gut response. What I did is I started to take inventory of my intuition. And so I was getting a gut feeling, Lisa, I actually think this actually happened trucks a year ago. I actually think this person's using me. I think this person, something suspicious about them.
yeah,
But I didn't have any actual facts because if you wrote it down, right, on paper, it appears like the person's doing everything quote unquote right. They say
yes,
the right things, they do the right things, but there was just this weird gut feeling that I couldn't articulate. So I just
yeah,
wrote it down. I didn't act on it. I just wrote it down. This person has said something that has given me question to pause. I'm not
mm,
quite sure why. I'm just keeping inventory. And then 3 weeks later, they did it again. And so I went back to my cheat sheet and I was like,
yeah,
interesting. They've done this thing twice. By the
yeah,
third time, it no longer was a gut instinct. It was a result of me taking inventory and seeing that actually they were doing it repetitively.
mm,
So that almost how I would approach a gut instinct.
yeah,
In seeing like, don't just react to it, actually see if it's actually true.
yeah.
And then, sorry, there was part of your question that I think that I missed.
Oh no, I think that might have been a phenomenal
Oh,
answer because my brain went somewhere else too. So if we did, I completely forgot it because you took it in
oh,
a great direction. Because I'm thinking around you what you're saying, and for me, the way I look at that is I try to explain to people just from a logical standpoint. Our brain's taking things in millions of points a day where there's weird noises or, something you see on the television or marketing or conversation with my wife. And at the same time, I'm taking in inflections of tonality. I'm looking at, mannerisms of speech and how their face and their eyes. So I'm bringing it in, but I'm not consciously holding it. But it goes in and it goes in. And what I call that is I do call it the gut or intuition. I go, my gut has all this insight back here. Something went back and that thing's going, hey, there's something going on. And most people go I'm over here right now. Right. And we put it away. And so for me, what I call my gut, I think I train it. I pay attention to it. And I've noticed now, there's certain things I'll feel and I'll go, feels funny. I'm not going to shut that up because I think a lot of people, let's say, for example, in relationships, we're in these relationships with people. We're doing things, whether it's a professional relationship, an intimate relationship, and something happens. And I go, little red flag. And I go, shut up. And push it back. And I keep living my life because either one of two things. One, I don't really want to pay attention to it because I think it's crazy. Or two, God forbid it's right. And I got to face this thing. And so people shut off the intuition thing and wonder why their life keeps recycling the same experiences.
Oh my God, that's so true. I actually wrote that in my book, Radical Confidence, about the fact that we don't often open up the can of worms because we don't want to deal with all the mess that comes with the can of worms. And to me, the can of worms is the questions, right? Sometimes we don't want to ask ourselves those obvious questions because we're so fearful of what the answer may be. Even something simple, going back to relationships of, am I happy in this marriage? Asking yourself that question, Drux, can lead to, what if you say no?
Yeah.
And now, if you've got 3 children, a mortgage, grandparents that are living with you or in-laws, right? In just you asking that question has now led to years and years and years and years and years of you maybe having to deal with turmoil. Maybe you have to deal with divorce attorneys, with, custody. And so many people won't even ask themselves the question, are you happy in the marriage? Because they don't want to deal with everything that comes with it. But what happens is it just becomes a pressure cooker. You're literally just trying to keep putting the pressure on that lid that eventually needs to come off in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is true. It's one of those things because you're listing these things and I go, oh, it was my marriage, right? Because years ago, my wife and I got divorced, but it was this question of oh man, we got 3 kids, we have this house together, the businesses together, and if we get separated, what is it? And then it spun into something crazy because we didn't face it. And so you start doing things that are behind closed doors. You start making little statements, and then little by little, you don't realize it until you're so far apart. It's I can't reach you anymore, and it falls apart.
Yeah.
And some people never close that. I'm just thankful. Somehow my wife and I came back together. I think it's a part of my faith that anchors that reason as to why, but we're now in an amazing marriage. And we had a weird conversation just last night when I was like, but we have the conversation and we don't let it sit.
What's the weird conversation? Do you mind if I ask?
Yes and no. Here's the thing. The conversation, it was a sex conversation, right? And it was one of those ones which, they're not always the funnest to have. And it was kind of like this dynamic where there's perspectives that I carry about what's going on with her. And I try to read her properly. And then she's in a situation where she's doing something physical and athletic. And so I don't want to, press too much on her. And so there's that dynamic. And then because of the dynamic, it was this thing where I thought I don't leave her alone. And she's like, why aren't you, And I was like, but I thought why'd you think that? And I go, well, because of this. And so it got this back and forth. It wasn't mad. It wasn't even an argument at all, but it was a conversation. And the conversation was a little bit, but here's the thing though. At the end of it, I go, I'm very happy we had this conversation because God forbid 6 months of this goes by and that little space happens. So I'm glad she initiated the conversation for how she felt. And that's the weird thing is most people would avoid it, but we've come back in a space in this new marriage where we can do that. Not always easy, but we can do that.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important to have those conversations no matter how uncomfortable. And that's the one thing that Tom and I just agreed on from the start. So as you know, Tom and I have been together for 22 years. We've been married for 20. And part of that was making sure that we agreed from the start that we would always talk about the hard things, say the hard things, even if it's going to hurt the other person, because we agree that we would rather be honest, not intentionally hurt someone, but still hurt them, than hold something back and then keep it secret. Because the second there's something that unsaid, now it creates this gap between you. And so Tom and I always swore that there would be no gaps. It's like those puzzle pieces, right? We want to fit perfectly together. And so in order for us to do that, you have to be honest about the things that aren't easy, that are uncomfortable, and that you really do wish you never had to say it. But the truth is that sometimes you have to have those conversations. And so Tom and I being together for so long, part of it is talking about the phases in our marriage. So, when we first get together, it literally is you stop talking to all your friends, you don't do anything except be with that person. And it's all intoxicating. Now, when you've been with somebody for 22 years, and if I can be I'll try and be very polite, but if I can be so honest, my husband no longer has a problem of keeping his hands off me. Whereas when we first got married, he had a problem of keeping his hands, off me.
Yeah.
And so as a woman, that starts to make you think, am I less desirable? Are we less connected? I'm less youthful. So actually, not only does he perceive me as more desirable, am I less desirable? I ask myself all these questions, which of course then gets into your mindset, that then creates like this self-esteem issue and this not imposter syndrome, but that conflict with, am I good enough, and whether I like to admit it or not. In our ages, my husband has got more wealthy over the time, and guys are valued more for their resources, and women are generally, of course, but women are valued generally for their youth, based on the fact that we can procreate, we can have children easier, not to go down that rabbit hole. But I understand it, so I don't argue it. But at the same time, I don't like to think that I'm less desirable just because I'm getting older. I feel more powerful, more independent, more creative, more, knowledgeable. And so I had internal turmoil about this, because I'm like, I think I'm more confident, I'm more impressive.
Yeah.
But he is having problems he's having not problems, but he's no longer like fawning over me. And so I just pulled him aside and I was like, I have to be honest with him. I was like, babe, is there something that I'm doing? Do you want me to be more sexually, active with? Do you want me to dress up more? And he was like, God bless you for asking me, babe. But he's like, I'm just getting older. I don't have as much testosterone, now in my 40s that I did in my 20s. And because we were able to then talk about it, it was just like, oh, we just had all the real discussions that I was able to be very honest and transparent about how I was feeling. And I wanted to make sure that it had nothing to do with our relationship. And so if I hadn't have done that, you can imagine what kind of thoughts I would have spiraled into spinning. But the fact that I was able to take a breath, say, okay, Lisa, you made a promise. You have to talk to him about it. And because we had made the commitment that he would be honest, I actually knew that if he was less attracted to me, that he would be honest about it. And I would expect him to. Like if he was like, yeah, babe, you know what? You don't dress up anymore. And I actually really loved it when you put on, your high heels, and you used to do that a lot. And now because of COVID, you don't do it. I need to give him space to be able to say that without judgment.
Yeah. That's a big piece right there. Oh, all of that. My head was already going this direction. My camera is having so much fun flickering for noise. But the thought is there is that space where you just said is like going there without having this argument or possible, some kind of energy and response be negative and spin up. Because I love the idea of talking, and we do have these conversations, but it took us years to get to the point of hearing something without letting the emotion run rampant. That was, I think, the hard part for us was the emotion would take off and I go in this direction. I think this thing. And then if I don't speak it out loud, then what ends up happening is I start to create a different version. I have close people in my life. One of my close friends had a situation in his marriage where he wasn't going great. He kind of at one point ended it, but leading up to it, he had this thought of like, I don't want to be in this marriage, and she's not doing this and not doing this and not doing this. And I go, well, have you said anything to her? He goes, no, I haven't said anything to her. I go, then you expect her to be a mind reader? Like, if you don't say anything, you can't get mad because someone's not doing it. Like, well, they should do this. I said, well, should they though? Because obviously they're not. And maybe it's not because they dislike you or something wrong. But if you haven't spoke up for your needs, it's hard to expect your needs to get met. That's why babies cry. It's the baseline thing. And so for a lot of human beings, I think they do get to that point of, like you said, my mind spins up because why is he doing this? And why aren't you doing that? And so to be able just to communicate it directly is interesting. And now I find that direct statements are not, in my experience, women's strongest suit. I find my wife, she'll have conversations in her world and she's like, this happened. I go, did you ever just say that? She goes, no, I can't say that. I'm like, but you said it in 20 areas around the circle. If you just went and said that, wouldn't it be helpful? And I wonder, is that something you've experienced or do you notice as well?
Yes, 1,000%. And so that's really getting over, okay, why am I not actually articulating what I'm looking for? Because he will say the same thing. He's like, you think you've just told me what you want, but you've just said that in the last 15 minutes, he's like, I still don't understand what you want. And I'm like, oh, so what we've realized is I just need space to say words. And I've literally said this now, give me space for 10 minutes to just talk. Because what I've realized is I talk so I can understand myself. And so I actually, in my conversations with my husband, I sometimes lead with emotion. Now, when you lead with emotion, you don't have clarity. Now, that's okay. But just to understand that maybe right now, in that moment of emotion, you don't have clarity. And if you don't have clarity, then how are you going to expect someone else to understand what you mean, what you're saying, and then what to change? And so Tom and I have identified there's moments of emotion. That's usually the first 10 minutes. That's where I say to him, I just need space. He lets me talk. Then after about 10 minutes, he says, okay, are you in a place now where you're looking for solutions? Because it's always the joke, right? The guy's trying to fix it and the woman just wants to talk. Instead of just guessing, we've actually said, all right, we've had an agreement on how we argue. We have an agreement on how we debate. We have an agreement of how we discuss things where we don't agree. And that goes, okay, for the first 10 minutes, maybe I just have to say things out loud. Then after that 10 minutes, he has to actually say, babe, I'm still not clear. And in that moment, I then either need to give him concrete bullet points of what to do, or I still don't have clarity. And in that moment, he'll say to me, you don't have clarity. And I'll say, thank you for helping me realize I don't have clarity. I need to go away, get my mind right, and then I'm going to come back to you. So to give a very silly example, but this was so profound, I started to not feel connected with him. Okay. And so for people that may not know, me and my husband are business partners. We built Quest Nutrition together. We built Impact Theory together. And so to him, he's like, I see you every day. Now I see him every day as a partner, not as a business partner, not as a spouse. And so for him, it's just different. He feels like he sees me all the time. I don't feel like it. So we've identified we're not the same person. It feels different to me than it feels to him. So identify that. Then number two, when he comes to me, when I'm in husband and wife mode, I'm going to talk to him very differently than how he's going to talk to me. So we just have different ways of talking to each other. He's very more blatant, direct when he's my business partner, and I'm very wordy in general, as you can tell. So we're always established. So number one, we have to establish, am I talking to you as my business partner or as my husband? Those are going to be very different. So establish that. Then give me space to say a lot of words and have the emotional response. Then identify that it is an emotional response. And then in that moment, if I can't come to let me back up. Let me just retrace that from that example. Sorry. So, okay. So I say to him, babe, I'm talking to you as my husband now, not as my business partner. So he then brings guards down. So that allows him to act and show up in a different way. Then it's, I am feeling disconnected. Now, when I say that, I don't necessarily know what I'm feeling disconnected over. So then he was like, well, what do you mean? Right. And as a woman, to your point of your wife, maybe you're just saying a lot of words. Now, in those moments of me saying a lot of words, he doesn't actually know what to do differently.
True. I get it.
He's just heard me out, but he actually doesn't know what to do differently. So I said to him, well, babe, you're always working. When we talk, it's business. So I'm feeling like I don't have your attention. Okay, what does that actually mean? Well, when you come in the room, you've always got your headset on because he's listening to books, he's researching, he's doing something. Okay, that's again just emotion. So he's like, so what do you want me to do? Do you want me to walk in the room and not have my headphones on? As the husband, as the man, I don't want to be necessarily gender specific, but I've noticed this. As the man, he's like, just tell me what to do. Like when you walk in the room, do not have your headphones in. Great. He's like, I can do that. But unless you are the one that's identifying that that's the communication piece that I need, he's unable to deliver on that. And so he's like, unless you actually tell me, do not walk in the room with me, my headphones on. He's like, I'm worried I'm just going to keep disappointing you. And in those moments of disappointment, you think it's about you and you think that you haven't been heard. But the truth is, I haven't given him the gift that he needs in order to be able to show up for me. And so in what you were saying about your wife is there are moments of she just needs to speak. She doesn't need you to fix it. And then you need to go, cool, I've heard you. Now I actually need to know what to do. And until, wife, you tell me the exact steps that you need, I'm unable to show you that I'm willing or not willing to show up and do that. And that's where the break comes, is that I feel like I've told Tom, hey, babe, I need to have your attention when you walk in the room. But he doesn't realize what I'm saying is it means that you shouldn't have headphones. So now I've given him a feeling that he's unable to actually execute on. So he may walk in the room and give me a kiss, but he's still got his headphones on. And now I'm like, you weren't paying me attention. And he's like, what are you talking about? I deliberately said to myself that I'm going to walk in the room and give you a kiss. And now you can see as a couple, these small little nuances where you end up not getting on the same page. And then what happens, Trucks, is 5 years down the line, your wife turns around to you and she says, you don't ever listen.
Yeah. It's heavy, man.
But you have been listening, but you just didn't know what to actually do. And so then you become total different pages.
Yeah. What's funny is I don't think a lot of women are going to want to accept it, but I think it's the truth. To my core.
Why don't you think?
No, I think it is. I think it is the truth.
No, but why?
Well, here's
but
the
you
thing.
said women don't want to accept it. Why do you think that?
Then what happens is, with my wife example, this thing you're talking about, we actually have had these conversations, and I'll explain to her, because she'll get mad that I didn't do or think it this way, and I go, listen, my brain literally doesn't think the way yours does. It can't. My brain is my own brain, and it processes. So when you're seeing this, please don't place in there my lack of operating how your brain is as an active choice to disagree or to go away from that thought. It never came in my mind. So just that's the heart of me. You know my heart. Secondly, I need you to tell me things, because she'll do this thing when she goes, you going to leave that there for the next couple of days? Like I get home from a trip and my bag's on the table. Are you going to leave these here for a couple of days? And I go, no. I go, why don't you just ask? Can you take these upstairs? Like it's a simple, and I've been doing this a lot now, and she's getting it slowly. Because when she says that, as a man, I take it as passive aggressive. Like, well, I'm not a child. Just ask me to take the bags upstairs. I'll gladly take them upstairs. And so we've been doing that, which is better. But then here's the thing where I said women may not like that. There's two things that sit in my head when I hear this from what my wife and I did. Whenever I place it there, she goes, oh, so it's my fault. I go, no, it's not. It's not about anybody's fault. Because then when it's her fault, now we're in a fight. And I go, it's not that it's your fault that this took place. I'm just saying the best way to get me to do what you'd like me to do, so I'll do it without a fight picking up, is just be direct, because I can't sift through the conversation, which means I'll keep doing it and you'll think I'm doing it opposite intentionally. Now we have more problems. That's one piece of it. And I also think that from my experience, at least, whenever I say they're not going to like this too much, is there's part of it where I have to rethink how I'm doing things, and it gets frustrating for her. And the frustration then comes through with a directness, right? So it's like, I really have to, are you a child? I'm like, no, I'm not a child. But this is the way my brain works. Like our conversation last night, she's always stated like she prefers mornings. So totally cool. I'm always up at like 5, 6 in the morning, right? And she's still asleep until like 8 or 9. So my brain doesn't go, wake her up, because I'm like, that got ruined. You're in the middle of sleeping. And she goes, no, well, I've never said that you can't. And I go, well, your preference, you said, was morning. And so she's like, why don't you try at night? I said, well, because you said your preference is morning, and I'm not going to bother you at night when you're tired after a long track day. And she goes, see, but there's been times when I came in and I initiated before bed. And I go, yeah, but it seems like the one-off. That's more of you deciding. I'm just trying to be respectful. So choosing not to wake you up. She's like, well, when have I ever said no whenever you've woke me up? And then I went back to sleep. And I go, so you're telling me I can wake you up and you'll go back to sleep? Yes. Okay. Then that's the information I needed. Well, why did you know that? How am I supposed to know that? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, as a man's logical brain. So I'm like, it's not that I'm purposely trying to none of that. It's like, this is just how my brain's been triggered. And I operate off of like a coding. Like if we're less floaty as men. I'm very direct. Like, this is what you want. Okay, cool. I know that now. Boom. We're done. We're locked in. And then it should be good ongoing. But without that conversation, or me having that, even last time was a little bit wonky, because she's like, I really have to talk to you and say it like that. I go, yes, very intelligent, but that you do, because that's how my brain works. And so that's where I think it's going to be fun to see that. But I agree. It helps things in the long run for both parties.
As you were talking, you know what I was really thinking? There's a massive difference between need and want. And I think as women, we've been taught and trained. And when I say that, I don't necessarily blame guys, by the way. It's kind of like the way that we have been raised by perceptions of perceptions. Like my dad is very traditional Greek Orthodox, but when you see where he's come from, I don't take it personally that he thought I'd be a stay-at-home wife. I see it as his perception growing up in a small village in the mountains of Cyprus. Of course he's going to have that perspective. So I almost like don't see that as a bad thing. So when I say things like women have been taught that being needy isn't good, I just think that that's been passed down through generations. Anyway, so to say that, I think that we have been taught that being needy is wrong, being needy is bad, and no one wants someone that is needy. And so what we have been taught is to us not speak up about what we actually want. And it makes us feel needy if we say what we want. And so are we able to pass through the difference between needs and wants? Like, for instance, I say, I don't need my husband, but you better damn believe I want him. And I actually think it's way more powerful to say there's 7.8 billion people in the world, and I don't need to be with Tom. But out of 7.8 billion people, I choose to be with him. That's way more impressive. It's way more, I think, exciting, way more pride, way more special to say that out of all the humans in the world, I choose him because I want to, not out of necessity. So even with what your wife is saying and with the discussion that we're having, I think it comes from two parts. I think it comes from, number one, giving space for us women to be able to say what we want using different language. Okay, babe, what is it that you want? I assume it's sex that you're talking about, but like I would just say, oh, right, babe, I really want to make you so sexually satisfied. Let's sit down. And I really want to hear, what is it that I can improve on? What is it that you would like me to change? What is it that you want to see different? And now you approach it from a want standpoint. It comes from an excitement standpoint, because here's what I'm guessing she feels, and a lot of us women feel, especially when it comes to sex and things like this. You want a guy to be attracted to you. In fact, the example I gave you earlier about my husband, the reason why it was hard for me to ask Tom was part of me was like, oh crap, what if he's actually not sexually attracted to me anymore? And so for your wife, she just wants to feel sexually attracted. She doesn't want to have to tell you to make her feel sexually attracted. Now, here's the thing that won't work. It won't work for her to just sit back and hope that you make her feel like that. And that's where the difference is. And so for me and Tom, because we had this discussion, because he was like, you know, babe, I need your help. He's like, if you're relying on me to always make you feel beautiful, attractive, he's like, then it's a recipe for disaster. And this was the process that I had to go through to say, how do I get my own validation? How do I do my hair in a way that makes me feel great? And then the truth is, I do want my husband to drool over me. So what I'll do is every so often I'll pull him aside and be like, all right, babe, what is it going to do to make you drool? What is it outfit do you want me to wear? Right. And I just ask him, but it's hard to initiate those discussions. And especially for someone like myself, and I don't know really your wife, but I had really struggled with self-esteem issues. And so when you suffer from self-esteem issues, when you don't feel pretty, when I was bullied for my looks, Trucks. So you can imagine, if I was bullied for my looks, the last thing I want is to turn around to the one person and say, make me feel pretty.
Yeah.
And so you just hope that they do. And if they don't, you think it's something about you. And so if we can just shed all of that, shed the meaning of, you know, telling your partner what you want, shedding, you know, even the words with wants and needs, and then creating space to say, cool, where aren't we happy? If we're not happy in the bedroom, let's talk about that. If we're not happy in chores, let's talk about that. If we're not happy in finance, let's talk about that. And let's just start from what are our assumptions, you know, because you may have a base assumption that she doesn't have. And no matter how much you've been with them, right? Let's say her base assumption is that as her husband, you should make her feel pretty. But your base assumption is, as a woman, that should come within yourself. Whatever, right? I'm just making this up. Well, now you can see why your base assumptions are going to lead to you guys acting in a different way. And so, for instance, my base assumption with my husband is that he would disrespect me every time he wouldn't make the bed, because I was taught as a child that to respect yourself, the first thing you do is you make your bed. That's how I was actually taught. So now I see my husband who doesn't care, who never makes the bed. And so I take it as an insult an actual insult, a sign of disrespect,
Yeah.
just
No.
because I have a different base assumption. Now,
Yeah.
my husband's base assumption is that there's only 24 hours in a day. Where the hell are you going to put your time and effort? It's only going towards something that actually makes something that leads you towards your dreams or your desires, or to become the person you want to be.
Yeah.
So every time my husband looks at the bed and he says, does the bed help me towards my goals, my dreams, and the person I want to be? No. So I'm not going to do it. So his idea of why he didn't make the bed is out of respect for himself.
Mm-hmm.
But my idea of why you should make the bed is out of respect for oneself. So you can understand, until we get down to the base understanding of why we do or don't make the bed, we're just going to keep freaking fighting. Because ultimately, it's not actually about making the bed. It's about the sign of disrespect or the sign of respect.
I agree. It's a lot. And I think it's so rooted in the baselines that we don't even think about the fact that we're thinking about it. It's like, like your thing.
You so think you're right. Like, I so thought I was right that of course everyone should make a bed. What kind of mad person doesn't make their bed, right? Like, and if I can be totally honest with you, the truth was I was a bit snobbish about it. I was like, who doesn't make a bed? Like, what kind of upbringing did you have, right? Like, that part of me that became so, like, judgmental in the belief that making the bed was so right. Now you take that one little tiny thing, and now you imagine Tom and I are not able to vocalize our ideas. We're not able to articulate them. You're just spending 20 years of arguing about the bed, and then before you know it, you want a divorce and you don't know why, and it's because they disrespected you, and you can't actually articulate why they have totally disrespected you. It all stems from these small little things that you think are minute, that you think are just being about the bed, but it ends up being way bigger than that. And what I have just defined and come to the conclusion of is you just need to have a relationship where you can treat it with honesty, and then in some way a business. You need different roles in a relationship. You need different responsibilities in a relationship. It's just like a business partner, like me and Tom. If we had the same skill sets, one of us would be obsolete.
It's true. Very true.
And so we deal with that in our relationship. I'm the one that can identify the fact that we're not connecting as often. We've just literally sat down, because I used to think, if he didn't buy me flowers, or if he didn't take me out on date night, or if he didn't say he missed me because we didn't, let's say, have a date for 3 weeks, I thought, oh my God, does that mean I love him more than he loves me? That's such BS. No, it just means that he's got a different bandwidth of connection than I do. So once we established that, we just said, cool. Whose responsibility is it then to make sure we're always aligned? And I said, I think it's mine, because I sense it sooner than you do. And he goes, okay, I agree. And so within that agreement, we then said, now I'm responsible for being the person that, let's say, waves the flag. And if I wave the flag, it means that you have to stop work and we have to do date night. Do you agree that if I'm the one who's responsible for waving the flag, then you have to reciprocate by saying, okay, dropping whatever you're doing that night? And so we just pinky swore, right? You do all of these little pinky swears before they actually happen, so that it gets to the point where I don't feel needy, because we've agreed I'm going to wave the flag. So now I've got my responsibility. I've waved the flag. He knows that when I wave the flag, he reciprocates. And now there's no arguments about how to approach any given issue within a relationship. It literally is like a business.
Yeah, I like it. I think there's a lot hidden within that, because I've expanded on some of these things too, because there's an aspect of, even outside of relationships, but deeply within relationships, where an inaction is seen as an action in opposition. Right? This thing didn't happen, like you said, and so he was doing this, and like there's an interesting thing where, like, I have to tell my wife, like, I'm not actively doing something in this manner because I didn't do this here, and I think that becomes this other part of it. And so, like, understand that the inaction is not an action in one aspect. Another part of it, I think, that I heard is, for me, when I start thinking about the steps of, like you're talking about, hey, do this, can you ask for this? I had some people I was just working with we're talking about relationship stuff. And I'm not a relationship coach by any means, but they really wanted me to help them. So I was like, sure, let's help them. And I did a great job, because I just used logic, which my logic at least, and it worked. But what happened was, with one of the women in the relationship, was a lot of it, she's like, well, I don't want to be a task on his to-do list. I want him to want to, and I go, but for some people, like this person individual, like that's how they function. Their life is run off of tasks. And so you're this errant thing up here. Not that he wants you to be, but he doesn't know how to bring you into this. And when he brings you in the way that would be best for you and get your thing, you're mad at how he brings you in. So I said, what if you tried this? Because most of us men, like when we have a rhythm of something, we notice when the rhythm's off, but we have to set the rhythm first. I said, what if you start finding a way to become part of the rhythm intentionally, structurally in the day to where it's a rhythm, and then you get to use it over a couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months. Imagine a year of doing this. He will know when it's off if you miss date night. He'll know if it's off if something happened, because it'll feel out of whack with his rhythm. But it starts with you letting him operate how he operates so that you both win. He is able to serve you the way he wants, because let's take it the other side of the spectrum. Let's say he never does this. You want to leave him. You guys both cause havoc to both parties, because divorce is never fun. I've been there. It's not fun. And the idea is, like, if you can just get to the point of understanding that sometimes you do need to state transparently, I need this, without him thinking of it before you, and realize that's how it might be until it gets to a rhythm of it, then you'd be like, oh, then eventually you get to that place where you really want to be. So what are you willing to do to get where you want to be?
Oh God, I love that so much. And then also to touch on the fact that you said, I just want him to want to. He probably does. But let's all face it, if you think wanting something is enough, then we'd all have six-pack abs, be very wealthy, stay young forever, and have a lasting relationship. So it's like, even in that want, it's like you have to be so transparent in understanding there's a massive chasm between wanting and executing. And so the wanting is the maybe the spark, right? The flame that starts it. But if you want to make that into a roaring bonfire, you have to keep feeding it the air. You can't literally just stop feeding it, otherwise the spark dissipates. So how do you keep feeding that air to keep it alive? And that takes constant work. And so just like if people want to get wealthy or be successful or have a successful relationship, it means that you have to come up with, how are you going to do that? An action plan, because just willing it won't work. And so when Tom and I, almost because we built our businesses at the same time, we realized that we had to somewhat echo it, in that fact that nothing happens by accident. You have to put time and effort into anything, otherwise it won't survive. So neglecting a relationship will mean that eventually your relationship will feel like it's been neglected. Same with a business. And so understanding there's a massive gap between wanting, but then also a massive gap between the knowledge, because even in listening to us, right, Trucks, it's like people actually have to go away and start to implement the things. So there's the want, there's the knowledge, and then there's the action. And then the action then means what works for me, what doesn't, and then the repeating it of like, okay, this didn't work, how do we improve it? This didn't work, how do we improve it? The physics of progress is what Tom and I talk about. It's what's the physics of progress towards our relationship. If we want to improve on something, we have to actively put in a plan and then show up to execute on that plan. Now, the funny thing is, people just often laugh or be like, oh my God, you guys sound like business. And it's like, okay, well, this is all I know. And all I can say is 22 years in, we're way more connected and in love than we've ever been. And so I don't think that that's by accident. That isn't damn luck. That is the fact that we're willing to work at it. And so, I think that we so associate someone's wanting something with a reflection of if it's going to succeed or not. And so I think that may be trapping this poor guy, because he may want it, but just not be able to execute on it. And if you perceive that as his heart, then you're going to be in for a surprise. And that's actually one little tip that I use with Tom. Anytime, Trucks, that we end up arguing or not communicating and we just seem like we're on different pages, or I seem offended, right? Like, I can't believe he said that to me. The very first thing that I have in my toolbox, the very first thing is I go to, does he love me? That's the first question I ask. Yes, cool. Did he intend to just upset me? Those are the two questions. No. Now, the second
questions.
So powerful, because if I say, yes, he loves me, no, he didn't intend to, then amazing. Whatever we're arguing about, he didn't intend to. Cool. He may have, and you have to address that. I'm not saying ignore it. But now you go, okay, if he didn't intend to, where were we misaligned? Because that's what it means, right? There was some misalignment somewhere in your relationship where he said something or did something without intentionally meaning to. You have to identify that. You have to talk to him about it. And you have to say, oh, maybe you didn't realize. But when you say this word, you actually, in fact, this is something that I say to Tom. In assessing that argument or that disagreement, I'll go, oh, he triggered me. And in that trigger, this is the masterclass right here. I'll go to him and I'll say, okay, babe, I've just realized you've triggered me. Now, my trigger is my responsibility. But for now, please do not say X, Y, and Z, whatever word is triggering you. Mm-hmm. I will work on my trigger because I don't think it's healthy to ever say to your partner, you cannot say this because you trigger me. Mm-hmm. That becomes almost like a demand. And in mine and Tom's relationship, we try never to demand things like that. I think that becomes a little dismissive. So
I think I can agree with that.
So we just say, yeah, I'm triggered. For now, please do not say these words. And I will work on my trigger. And then if he triggers me again, I literally did this like 3 weeks ago. I was so proud of myself. He triggered me again on something. And I said to him, babe, I know you didn't mean to, but you just triggered me again. I'm still not there yet. So I appreciate you helping me, right? Because that's another thing, is that I want to help my partner on these boundaries, because boundaries are never just to shut someone out. Boundaries, I think, are to bring someone in and help you. So I help him set these boundaries with me by saying, I'm not there yet. Please do not say that word yet, but I'm getting there. You know, and then it becomes, now you're bringing your partner in to helping you with this trigger, with this thing that otherwise you probably just butt heads, and then that becomes this explosion because they're pressing your buttons. And let's face it, when you're with someone that you're that close to, when you're opening, you're being so vulnerable, you know exactly what buttons to press. And that goes to another rule that Tom and I always said. We just pinky swore. So we literally have a rule book, a relationship rule book.
I love it.
And another one is you never weaponize my vulnerability.
Smart. It's big. That's a whole other hour conversation right there.
That is, yeah.
I love this way you're thinking through this, because here's the thing. I think as I hear this, I go, it's powerful for you to communicate that. Not many do, and I don't think many receive that well. Like, I'm at the point in my relationship, I could hear that. Like, there's some things, and so for example, in our marriage, being transparent, is we had a situation where, she had an affair. So there's certain things that with both parties that happen. Ringtones that my phone has, and clothing that if I wear a certain pair of shoes, it causes a little bit of a trigger. As we have an understanding, which we haven't worked through 100%. We kind of just chose all right, I won't wear those shoes, and I won't have that ringtone, And so certain things trigger, but we do have the ability to have the conversation. And I think there's something to that, which you said also, of saying what happened was metaphorically, I hear that this, it's like we were on other sides of the table, and a lot of us push the problem to that side of the table. You push it back to this side, and we go back and forth. But at some point, one has to walk around the other side of the table and pull that problem in and solve it together, even if it's caused by the other person. For example, I had a situation with this, adultery type situation, an affair. I had to walk around the table and pull it in and solve the problem with my wife in the area where she stepped out. That was a heavy, hard one to do. But in doing so, it taught me so much, taught her so much. It keeps us in a really strong place. And to be honest, what it was this other part of it too that goes in, okay, here's the problem. It starts with some kind of actions. And I think what I'm hearing from you is there's points where you can state something and say it, and it's coming back to you in a positive way, where for some people, they go, I need this. And I go, well, you ain't giving me that, so I'm not going to give you that. And then it goes again, well, because you aren't giving me this, I won't give you that because you won't give me that. And boom, 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 boom. And I go, at some point, one of you has to take your pride, shove it in the garbage can, and go, I'm going to do it even if I'm not getting what I'm getting. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to keep on doing it. And you just give and you do it, because eventually the human brain goes, man, this is crazy. This person just keeps on loving and giving me this. I feel, not obligation's a word, I feel like I want to reciprocate. I know what they even want me to do. How about I do that? And then you do that. And then it comes back in a positive way. And so we're at a place now where I can do and say, and it's like, I can say it and she'll do it. So I'll do it. I don't hold sex. I don't hold love. I don't hold affection. I don't hold kind words, even if she's being a butthead to me, which she does. I don't, because I know that if I meet her there, we'll just go down. If I meet her here, we both go up, and that's over time type thing.
Oh, God, I love that. It's funny because the analogy that I've used in the past is like a game of tennis. We're all playing tennis, and now you just have to decide, are you playing a game of singles or doubles? Because singles is only one person can win. Yeah. Right? You're playing the same game, but only one of you can win, and you're hitting the ball hoping that they miss it. Yeah. Now, doubles is if you're weak, if you're not great at something, let's say I'm just really terrible at backhand. Well, if I'm playing a game of doubles, you better believe Tom's going to try and get stronger at his backhand so he can step in and help me. Yeah. And so that's where in a relationship, you just need to freaking decide. I almost want to turn this into some sort of relationship game of tennis, because there's so much an amazing analogy of saying, just decide. Are you on the same side? Because if you are, the second that I get triggered of something, in this analogy, Tom goes, oh, well, I'm her partner. I'm next to her. She's weak here right now. So as her strength, I'm not going to say these words because that's what she needs. And this is how I'm going to help her. Now, to me, that is, I think I also, as a partner, you need to acknowledge when a partner actually is trying, even if they're not there yet, right? So it's like, hey, I really see that you're helping me. You know, you just triggered me again. You're not there yet, but I really do see it, and thank you. It's very meaningful to me that you're really trying to help me overcome this trigger, you know? And then I just sometimes make it into a joke that once I've overcome and I'm less sensitive to this trigger, I'm just like, oh, Billy, you know, sometimes put his toe on it, you know, and then I'll just start to joke and I'm like, you were testing my boundaries there, Bilyeu. I was like, and you got away with it, you know, and then we'll make it into a joke because I'm no longer triggered by it. Gotcha. So like, it just becomes this beautiful way of bringing the person into the dynamic as you're trying to overcome whatever issue, versus you come at it like two different sides. And it's really almost like the strongest person survives. And the truth is that I'm going to back down faster than Tom. Just in general. And I know that. And so, you know, it becomes making sure that you come up with, it's not just the strong will survive mentality, right? It's the articulation. It's, how are you going to talk about things, you know, with each other? And, you know, even going back to the shoes and the music and that you were saying, that's so beautifully transparent. So thank you for saying that. I think that's really like empowering to hear, because you're that honest. But I do think identifying that, and then in my head, I kind of I would try and use that as a way to bond instead of a way to push things under the rug. So like, you know, eventually, like I would, the first thing that when you said, I was like, oh, I would have a bonfire. Like literally, I would like with Tom, I would be like, let's do a chant together, babe. And let's do like a whole thing. And then we just put everything in the fire and then we'll chant and this will be a meaning, right? Like I'll create meaning in things like that but I don't think you can create meaning without identifying what it means to you now. So that's why I really wanted to highlight that. I think it's super important that you and your wife were able to say that, and almost even with no judgment. It's not like, hang on, you don't want me to wear those shoes? Why? It's like, maybe she doesn't have to give you the why right now. And the fact that you respect that is actually just as powerful.
Yeah, I think it's a big joy for like a journey for us. Is like I'm to the point now. She's like, just give me some time, and I actually give her time. I don't try to force the issue and sit her down right now. And I think there's something to guys want to fix it all. And there's a lot of journeys we've gone through that it just, I think it just takes time, you know, and it's going through and it's navigating the hardships. When they say marriage is the hardest work you'll ever do, no one gets that until you get to the depth of it and you're like into the work and you go, man, but it's the most rewarding, the most fruitful. Like it allows me to be vastly more free to chase dreams, to do things, experience certain aspects, whether it's parenthood or trips or travel, that I could never imagine doing solo. And so it's heavily worth the crazy amount of effort it takes. And so, man, this has honestly been one of my most favorite conversations ever. We've gone way over the time I typically record, and I don't even know how I just missed it. We're just going in flow. So, man,
I wasn't even looking at the time because
time flies when you're having fun, genuinely.
This has felt so like really raw and fresh and just very, it's been so beautiful, because I think people don't talk about these types of issues enough, you know, and me and you off camera will very often talk about, you know, like our partnerships and the important things to us. And, you know, I've heard the story with your wife, and I've just so admired how transparent and honest you are, because I think that that's the real stuff. And until you start to talk about the real stuff, you know, it feeds into other aspects. You know, before we spoke, you're like, oh, Lisa, what do you want to talk about? And the truth is, if I didn't have these skill sets that I'm developing in my marriage, I don't think I'd be a good business person. I don't think I would be a good sister. I don't think I'd be a good daughter. Like, all of these things have taught me so much on how to show up in every aspects, you know, and so the relationship part is very important to people. And I think that, you know, we've given some really concrete tips, and I'm just always blown away by you and your transparency. So
thank you.
It's super important.
I agree. It's the one thing that makes people not feel like they're alone. And that's my big thing earlier. I was like, man, I'm the only one in this. And when I started expressing some of the things, people in my own family that I'd known for decades, like, oh yeah, we had this happen. Why didn't you say something, man? Like, and it's almost like you go through a whole journey of like not being resentful, but realizing like, oh, like it's hard to talk about. It's not something people typically do. They weren't trying to subject me to that experience, but they just, that their own experience would trigger them, and they didn't want to battle those emotions again. So I realized, like, well, if I can handle it and I can navigate this, I can speak about it in ways that give someone a little bit of hope. I had given a speech 2 weeks ago on a stage and told my whole story like I typically do. And then I had a guy afterwards, a grown man, got to be 10 years older than me ish. And he's crying after, says, "Can I please talk to you?" So I was like, "Yeah, we found some time." I talked a couple days ago, and like finding out his journey, it's like, man, so many people are battling this and feel like there's no place to go and speak. So I'm glad I can provide a little bit of that, like that light of like, oh, it's possible to find that place that you've gone. So that's really why I talk about it. It doesn't make me any better. My marriage isn't better for talking about it, but it can help other marriages be better by talking about it.
Mm, that's so beautiful.
I appreciate you listening to me on this craziness as we tie this up, which it feels premature, but we could talk for hours. If I was to send people to get more of your brain, your heart, all the awesomeness, where should I best direct them?
You can go to Instagram at Lisa Bilyeu, and then YouTube, Women of Impact. I have incredible conversations, really trying to lean into these types of conversations, the real honest things, the transparent things that people aren't talking about, that I really do think that, to your point, is that once you start talking, you realize that you're not actually alone in all these different struggles. So YouTube, Women of Impact, or Lisa Bilyeu.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, last question. You can answer however you want to answer it. It's completely up to you. What promise did God or the Creator make to the world when they created you?
I'm not religious,
So I said create.
but yeah, I know. Yeah, exactly. That even an underordinary person can get back up and achieve their dreams as
Under
an
ordinary.
example to other people.
That's good. I've yet to hear
I
that.
don't, I don't, the funny thing is, I was like, where do I go with this answer? But yeah, I mean, that's, what I ended up dedicating my life to, is helping 14-year-old girls believe in themselves, because I just
Yeah.
think that if we believe that we can do anything, then we'll end up actually showing up and being confident and speaking our minds and, acting in accordance. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really held so many of us back. So being an example that you can keep getting back up.
I like that. Because I think even if people aren't under ordinary, they sometimes feel that way often more than they should. And so the concept of it is one. Because, yeah, I was at as a kid growing up foster care, like there wasn't anything special about me, but kept getting up and doing stuff and created some cool things. I get to hang out with you. Hey, look at that.
Your story is insane. Come on now. Your story is like mind blowing. The amount of people that you're helping just by being transparent about your life. Ooh.
Yeah, I try. We'll see what it turns into in
You know
years
the
from now. But so far, so good.
Yeah. Well, you know how much the Billies adore you.
Thank you. It's the feeling is mutual, and I get my special tea. She got this amazing
Yeah, you
tea. Hey,
do.
I'm gonna go get some more. But that's it, man. Thank you so very much for hanging out with me. Those of you guys who are still tuned in, thank you. I know for a fact that there is something in this conversation that could help either you in your own relationship or someone you know that is struggling. So do them and us a favor and share this episode with them. However you want to do it, send a link, click a button, whatever it is. Also, make sure you go and follow Lisa, check out her book, all the cool things she does, Women of Impact. Like, she's awesome. Genuinely, it will change your life. I love when she has the reel she does where she's sitting down, like they film her, she like throws her clothes off and walks out like a badass, just walking at you. It's dope. Hey, I seen it yesterday. So I was like, she really hit that.
And for people listening, I don't throw my clothes off. I throw my jacket off.
Jacket.
Although now I've got less people going to look at it. I should have just left it at that, Trucks.
You should have. Yeah. Oh man, that's good. I didn't even realize how I said it. Anyways, it's amazing. Go check her out. And as always, make the most of your shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Lisa Bilyeu signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning into the Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love if you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.